Hey, how are you doing? The last couple of weeks have been so hot here in the Netherlands that I thought it would be a great idea to paint an ice cream. Not that you can only eat or paint ice cream when it's really hot, because I think ice creams can be eaten all year round. I just love ice cream, so it doesn't matter if it's freezing cold. You can wake me up for a big bowl of ice cream. But we're not here to talk about my ice cream desires. We are here to paint an ice cream, and this will be about intermediate, beginner to intermediate level, I think. But for me, it's always pretty hard to decide what the level is. So yeah, just try to find out yourself if you are capable of doing this. I sure believe in you. So let's just get started. First of all, our canvas, it's 2000 by 3000 pixels. And to paint, we are going to use a reference image. Let me grab it. You can just swipe up from the bottom of your screen and then select your favorite app to open your reference image. I will be using Google Drive, and drag it to the side, and there it is, a delicious looking ice cream. Let me make it a bit smaller. Here we have our canvas. And for this tutorial, I will mostly be using, or at least try to use, the illustration brush set. If you are a master student, you will already have it. If you're an eager learner, then you can get it with a discount or come join the master student club. Let me grab the brushes. Where are they? There. First, I'll use the Sketch It brush to make a sketch of our ice cream here. Let me just grab a grayish color to get started. Now, the basic shape of an ice cream is pretty simple. At least if you have just one scoop. We'll have something of a circle at the top. And of course, that cone shape underneath. And you don't have to copy the exact proportions here. So we have a circle with something of a triangle underneath. We have some ice dripping here. So just a basic sketch. Here we have, well, that's that part of that waffle cone that's wrapped around itself. And of course we have this caramel dripping over our scoop. Not a super big fan of caramel. I find it a bit too sweet sometimes, but I won't complain if I get an ice cream like this. It would be great if there were some chunks in there, like cookie or some chocolate. I think we pretty much got the basic idea of an ice cream here. You don't have to sketch out all those, well, like little squares in the waffle pattern. Something like this is good. Let me move it around a little bit so it's centered. Yeah, that looks great. Let me save it. I'll just duplicate it so you can check out the process. You don't have to do this. This is just, well, for your reference if you want to look at the steps. I'll make a new layer underneath the sketch. Let me group these layers. I'll call this step 2. And let me just reduce the opacity of the sketch a little bit. Let's go to 50%. If I can manage, yeah, there we got it. And then to that layer underneath our sketch. Now I want to make the basic shape of the waffle cone first. And let me use the smooth lines brush for that. And for the color, first I'll go towards the oranges, reds, and then grab a middle tone brownish color. Perhaps something like this. Let me drop it in. Oh, what's that? Oh, I didn't select the layer. The brush is pretty small. I want to make it bigger. Yeah, it's at 25% right now. And I'll just follow my sketch. And you don't have to make very tidy line. You can keep it a little bit wobbly because you can see that that cone, it's not a perfect straight line. So don't worry about it if you have a shaky hand. I sure have a shaky hand sometimes. And we can just close it about here. And we can drag in the color to fill our cone shape. Next, we'll make the base color for the scoop of ice cream. And we'll do that on a separate layer. So let's click the plus for a new layer. And for the ice cream, we'll grab a lighter color. Go a bit towards the yellows. I think something like this. I'll drop the ice cream color over there. And now I want to make the brush a little bit smaller to make a bit more precise lines. Perhaps 10%, let me check. Yeah, that's nice. And I'll just make a shape for the ice cream. Now at the top we don't have to be that careful because that caramel will come on top. And I'll work from left to right. That just feels better for me. And I'll just follow that sketch a bit. But of course you're not married to your sketch, so you can let it go a bit. There, and now we can fill this shape by dragging in the color. It's already starting to look like an ice cream. And now finally for that third layer, or actually it's the fourth layer if you count that sketch as well, we'll make a layer for that caramel. And of course we will need a different color. I'll go a bit towards the reds and grab a dark brownish color. Let me check. Maybe something like this. We drop it in. And I will follow the sketch and make the base shape of that caramel. Now I will try to make these lines a bit more smooth, because unlike the waffle cone, this shape, this caramel, it does have smooth outlines. I'll just turn my canvas around, because sometimes it's just easier to make these motions in a certain direction. I always try to make them as long as possible. I think this looks pretty smooth. Let me fill it, because now I can always adjust it a little bit. I want some more over here, for example. I think we're good here. So let me duplicate this group so you can check this second step in the process. So again, you don't have to do this, but of course you can if you want to save your process. Now let me turn down the sketch a bit more. And now we can start adding some texture and some lighting to to the different parts of our painting. Let's get started with the waffle cone. I will set this layer to alpha lock. That way we can only paint on the shape that's already there. And first let me add a little bit of base texture to this waffle cone. I'm going to use the Grunge Rock brush for that. And if I pick this color, let me go a bit lighter. Let me check. I feel like that's not saturated enough. Yeah, that's better. Well, it's at full size. The opacity is at 40%, and I'll just glaze over that cone a little bit. And now I want to do the same thing with a darker color. Let me try something like this. Yeah, I think this is a good start. Now let me create a line for that. Well, this area of the waffle cone. Let me use a dry fine liner for that. Let me check. Yeah, I'm gonna make the brush a little bit smaller. Let's say 10%. And I'll just draw in this little edge here. A little bit wobbly. So we get that fold there. Now I would like to grab the Make It Darker brush. Now let me check the size. Well, that's about right. It's at 7% and the opacity is at, well, it was at 98%, I guess. And let's create these little squares. So I'm just roughly painting, creating these little squares, the square texture. With only a couple of strokes. You don't have to follow the reference exactly. Just want some of these squares. You can use the reference as a guide. And here the angle is slightly different. So keep that in mind. So right here we already have a basic waffle pattern. Now let's switch to the Make It Lighter brush. Let me pick that base color of the ice cream cone. Let's check the size. Let's go for 10%. Opacity is at 95. And now let's create those lighter edges. I want to go a bit smaller even. Let's go for 4%. But of course you can play around with that. can just follow those previous little squares that I made. Slowly refining that. I'll also make a little light edge along this, well, along this edge. So roughly following those squares. I want to go a bit lighter on that left side, so let me make this brush bigger. Perhaps 35%, yeah. We can just lighten up this side. This part as well. Okay, we got a nice looking base here. Let's move to the ice cream now. So we'll go to the layer above and again use Alpha Lock. So we won't be able to paint outside of that shape. Again, I want to use a texture. Let's go for the rough spackles this time. And I want to pick a darker color first. Let's check. I want to go bigger. Maybe 40%. Yeah. Let's just go over and give it a slight texture. Just as a base. Alright, now let me use the Make It Lighter brush. I'll just pick that local color. And you can see that this left side of the scoop, it's lighter than that right side over here. So let's make this area lighter. Just globally. And we can use the Make It Darker brush to make that other side a little bit darker. We'll make the brush a bit bigger, 25%. I'm gonna go smaller again, 8%. We want that little shadow underneath that caramel, because that is casting a little bit of a shadow on the ice cream. Over here as well. So we'll just go along that edge. And while we make the brush a bit, well, pretty small, let's say 5%, and let's go for that darker color, we can add some smaller, darker areas. Like here, you can see that part. You can see some shadows there. So I just try to focus on the darkest areas right now. Building up that shape of that scoop a little bit. And we're not finishing off here with small details yet. Just as with the waffle cone, this is our first pass of adding texture and lighting, and then later we can go back and add smaller little details. So you don't have to get lost in details yet. also grab the Make It Lighter brush for some lighter touches. Let me go back to that base color. I want to make the brush smaller, 5%. I just want to add some of those lighter parts. Here you have this nice shiny spot. That's a nice base, I think, for our scoop. So let's go to that caramel layer now. And again, we will use Alpha Lock, so we won't be painting outside of the shape. I can see lots of stuff going on there, lots of highlights and shadows. So let's start working on that. Let me just turn off the sketch layer, by the way. I don't think we need that anymore. And let me first grab, well, we already have it, the Make It Lighter brush. Go a bit bigger, 15%. And for the color, let's go for a bit of an orangey color. Like that. Nice warm colors we got there. And let's add some touches of light. You can see some light glow all through that caramel. Just adding some lighter parts here. Also there's just some color variation going on right now, which already makes it look more like caramel. Go a little bit bigger, 30%. Adding a little bit more glow here. And now let me grab the Make It Darker brush. I can make it, well, 5% is nice, I guess. We can add some slight dark touches to those edges. We've got this dark shape going on here. A little bit bigger, 16%. Let's already add some of those really, well, those brighter highlights as well with the Make It Lighter brush again. And I want to grab definitely a lighter color. I'll make the brush smaller, 6%. We can already start adding those brighter highlights. And you can refine them at a later stage, but let's just work on these already. You don't have to go too bright. We have this one over here. We have a nice shine here on top. You can also see some more subtle highlights just along these edges. We have an overall nice base for our ice cream here. So let me duplicate everything again to save the step. I'll call this one 4, and that will also be the final step, because in this final step we will start refining everything, adding those final details. Let me delete the what's it called? The sketch. Let me delete the sketch and we'll start with the waffle cone again and get started with refining that. For this stage of refining, I think it's actually nice to switch to the basic flow brush set. So let's do that, and let's use the darken line brush to work on the dark areas of that waffle cone right now. You can just pick up local colors and use the darken line brush to add little dark touches. I actually want to grab a darker color, perhaps something like this. And I'll make the brush, I'll set it to 15%. I feel like this color is a bit too dark. I think this is better. Let me delete that one. Sorry. And you can refine each of these little squares. Also be sure to add a little bit of a shadow underneath that ice cream here. Underneath that scoop. Because that's also casting a shadow there. And try to zoom out every once in a while to check out what your cone, what it's looking like. And you don't have to add these dark details to each little square. Like this left side, I want that side to stay a bit light. Want some shadow here underneath that ice cream. And you can also switch to the lighten line brush for the little lighter details on this side, for instance. You got some pretty light touches here. Now I think when we zoom out, we got a pretty nice looking textured cone here. Of course, you can keep tweaking it. You can go on for as long as you like. And we could also enhance the colors a bit. You know, you can use the overlay brush and select a warm color, perhaps like this one. Let's go to 20%, and you can just glaze over the cone to give it a bit more warmth. Alright, now let's move to the ice cream part. So let's go to this layer. And again, let me use the darken line and the lighten line brush here. I'll pick this dark color. Yeah, there I have it. I'll add these little dark holes that you can see in the ice cream. Nice texture. Let me make the brush a bit smaller. 7%. And as you can see, we're creating this pretty realistic looking ice cream without using any blending techniques at all, actually. So, well, a lot of people want to learn how to blend, but it's not really always that necessary to blend stuff. You can just keep painting. Of course, it can be handy sometimes, the blender tool. But it's also nice to get a texture in your painting and not smudge it to bits. Like, yes, often people tend to smudge their paintings too much, getting a very soft and blended look with edges that are too soft. Well, I think that paintings with a lot of texture in it and not that soft blended look often look more interesting. You want a nice variety of textures. Like here we have that caramel that is nice and smooth. And now we have those textures of the ice cream scoop and the waffle cone. Keep an eye on those different textures in paintings in your subject. Varying those textures, that will make your painting look more realistic. And of course, zoom out every once in a while to check out your work. I want to go to the lighten line brush to add some lighter areas. Some highlights on our ice cream. Adding a little bit of a like stripy texture here. Not sure if stripy is even a word. But you know what I mean. I'm going to go back to the dark line brush here and add some tiny, well, a little bit more of these tiny dark holes. I think that's a nice amount of texture actually for this style. We're not going for super extreme realism here. It's a bit more stylized. Still, it's hard to stop. All right, let's go and move on to that caramel on top. Again, I'll use, well, I don't think I'll use the darker line here. I think I'll just use the lighter line. And let's just grab this light color over here. And let's create a more crisp looking highlight. We need a very crisp one over here. Go a bit smaller. And bigger again. 19%. Let's go even bigger. I'm at 34% right now. And smaller again, 16. For this bright one over here. We also have some thin ones over here along that edge. And we can use the basic flow brush to just tidy this area up, for instance. I'll just pick the local color. I'm at 10%. I just want to clean up that edge a little bit here of that highlight. Looking delicious. Alright, let's tweak the colors a little bit using the overlay brush again. I want to make it a little bit warmer. Let me grab that orange. And let's just go over it, adding some of that warmth. And there you have created an ice cream cone. Relatively simple with some easy steps. Let's just do a rewind. Let's go to the first layer. That was our sketch, a very basic sketch. An ice cream is like a ball and a cone, like a triangle shape. You just need to sketch out the really basic, forms of the ice cream. You don't have to go too detailed. Then we created these basic shapes and we used 3 layers, one for the cone, one for that ice cream scoop, and one for the caramel on top. Then we did a first layer of texturing and lighting, and I kind of like this style as well, a bit more simplified. You could just stick with this. And then we added even more texture and details and ended up with this. But of course you can continue and make it super realistic. I kind of like this more stylized style. But yeah, go ahead and create your own. Maybe you want to create a different flavor of ice cream, decorate your ice cream in a different way. In any case, I'm looking forward to seeing your delicious ice cream creations. I want to thank you for watching, keep it cool, and do make sure you eat enough ice creams. I'll talk to you later here at Patreon. See ya!